Welcome, everybody, to Into the Fire, episode number 27, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Brought to you by KGRA Digital Broadcasting. How are you doing, Ronnie?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this guest. This is somebody that has never been on the air. He's never done a podcast, and he's not nervous one bit. And he really shouldn't be. You talk about an individual that knows how to just deal with people. We're talking about somebody that spent probably a quarter of his life in prison as a correction officer in one of the roughest prisons in this country, and that's Troy Belt. He's going to be a ton of fun, no doubt.
Yeah,
What's been happening? Huh?
Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. As far as work goes, still just organizing stuff and looking through case books and sending off lab requests. I'm trying to get in a little better shape. I'm doing a bike ride here in a couple weeks out in Colorado. That's 118 miles. So I've been adding a little extra bike riding to my weekly routine to get my legs and stuff ready for that. But no, everything's going well. How about you?
Going pretty good. I mean, we're I'm staying busy, and we ended up catching a murder on Juneteenth, and
Yeah.
it wasn't bad as far as on the difficulty scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10. My scale that I go by. This is
Yeah.
like a basic 1.
Okay.
I'm going to give this a 1 as far as stress, and it came together like it was easy. It was pretty easy.
Was it yours?
Nope, I'm the backer. I'm the designated backer, and that's kind of how it works for the listeners. Is ultimately we have basically 10 homicide detectives, and we got a lot of people in the house tonight. That's great. I
Yeah.
love to see it. But anyway, so once you get a murder, you go to the bottom of the list, and somewhere in the middle is when you're the designated backer. So now I can actually, have fun and do whatever I want, and I don't have to be sitting by the phone. So it's kind of nice once you get called out.
So
All right.
what if it had been yours though? Was it still a 1 if it was yours?
Yeah.
Or would it be like a 6?
No, this would have been a 1. I can't even give it. I can't give it any more difficulty. This is not possible.
Okay.
So let's bring Troy on because I'm gonna read his bio real quick. And when I asked him for a bio, believe me, it's not going to take very long. He followed directions. He started his career in 1998 as a correctional officer at Kentucky State Penitentiary, KSP. It's located in Eddyville, Kentucky, and actually, it's kind of cool because it's got a name it also goes by, which is known as the Castle on the Cumberland. He was promoted through the ranks of sergeant, lieutenant, captain. He also worked in internal affairs, and he was an administrative supervisor. And his last 6 years was the unit administrator, and or a unit administrator too. So he'll have to explain what all that is. And Western Kentucky State Commander of Hostage Negotiations. So that's how I got to know him. And so let's bring Troy on. Welcome, my brother from another mother. Troy.
How are you, sir?
Can you hear us? Well, of course, there's a little bit of a technical difficulty. So while we're waiting to get that sorted out, he can't hear us. So while we're getting to that, so let me tell you a brief story about how I met Troy.
Okay.
And this is kind of a fun story. I was speaking in Columbus, Ohio at the Midwest, and actually we've been speaking back and forth for several minutes. So I'm sure he's just going to click out and come back in. But I was speaking at the Midwest Crisis Negotiating Conference in Columbus, Ohio. And this was back in, I think it was in 2017. Can you hear us now, Troy?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Right on.
How are you,
All right.
sir?
I just did your intro. I've left people dazzled with that. And then I'm mentioning to them how I ended up meeting you. And this is kind of the story. It was in Columbus, Ohio. I think it was in 2017. And so after I get done presenting, Troy comes up to me, Troy and one of his other colleagues from Kentucky, from the Kentucky DOC. He goes, "Hey, man, we just loved it. Loved it." He goes, "What do you think about Kentucky?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've never been there." And he goes, "Oh, no, you're coming to Kentucky." And so, and after he said that, I have been to Kentucky, I think 7 times, and it's all because of you, buddy. All because of you.
I'm
So
glad you came.
I am too. I ended up going to LaGrange, Kentucky, and that's where the Kentucky State Reformatory is. I don't know if Amanda, you got that picture or not, but you can throw it up if you were able to get those in, but you may not have. Yeah, there it is. That's the State Reformatory. And so I got to mention this real quick too before we get rolling. But while I was there, the deputy warden, and I don't remember his name at this point, but the deputy warden was gracious enough to give me a tour through that prison. And while there was 2 things that happened while we were there that I thought were interesting. The number one thing was that there was this inmate that, God, this guy was like 7 foot tall. And I was like, holy cow, you had to have played basketball. And he was like, yeah, something like that. And so I walked on, and the deputy warden goes, yeah, that guy actually played for the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yes.
Who was that?
What's his name? Do you remember, Troy?
I don't know his name. They called him Tree. He went by a nickname Tree, but I can't.
Was his last name Rollins?
I don't think so.
Well, I can tell you, he was the first black basketball player to play for the University of Kentucky, and he had a little bit of a serial rape problem going on. That was kind of why he was there. But anyway, go ahead.
We had him at our place for a little while, and he transferred to another institutions. But
he seemed pretty docile. But at least when I met him, and then from there, the warden goes. He goes, hey, do you want to see where they make the license plates? And I was like, heck yeah. I wish I could have taken pictures in there, but you can't take your phone in there. But I went back there, and there's one guy basically doing each number, and it was really neat to be able to see that. So anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself. You started out, you were a correction officer forever. And how did you get started in that? How does somebody get started in the world of corrections?
Well, I wanted to be in law enforcement. That was my ultimate goal. And so I wanted to get my foot in the door. So I got into corrections, and I planned on being there about, 2 or 3 years. But I got in there, and I was a correction officer for 4 years. And I spent most of my time in segregation. So when you work there, back then you had to get a year before you could even work in segregation. But they seen how it was, so I got to move in segregation pretty early, within about a 6-month period. And I just loved it. I loved what I did. I had a lot of pride for it. We didn't get paid a lot of money then, so it was all about pride. Mm-hmm. And I just moved up through the ranks real quick, and by the time I was a lieutenant, I was making pretty good money. And so I just stuck it out and made a career out of it. After I had 10 years, I was like, well, I might as well go ahead and finish it up. So I got 21 years and some change in there. So had a great career. Loved the place.
The prison that you go ahead.
I was just going to say so the segregation, that to me, that seems like people who have done just some heinous crime, or they have been a problem child, even in prison. So what was it specifically that you liked about that aspect of it?
Well, it's not for everybody. It's no love or hate. You either love it or you're out. And it's a bad place. But, some people are good at them kind of places. And we was the maximum prison, so we got all the people's trash from all over the state. They sent them to us back in. So they'd go to 3 cell house. Back then, you could get whole time for up to 10, 15 years, you wasn't getting out of the hole. And, they just come over and did a lot of bad things, and you build a rapport with them, and, they're going to listen to ones that's over there. If you can bring somebody new in, it's going to be a bad day usually, especially if they don't know how to communicate with them. So, you got to know how to treat them and how to communicate with them, or you're going to have floods and feces thrown on you, and just all the bad things that you can think of. That's going to happen. So that was we called it the jail within the jail.
Yeah. And you started working. Yeah, actually, one of the deputy wardens warned me of that when I was walking down one of the aisles, and he goes, "Hey, well, you're liable to get something that you don't expect going down that row. So, but anyway, it was the Castle on the Cumberland, Kentucky State Penitentiary is where you actually started. And I think I read on here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Troy, that prison was completed in 1886. And Amanda, throw up those two photos. One of them, that's the actual entrance to this prison. It's known as the Castle on the Cumberland. And then the other, and it's right on, what is that lake there?
That's Barkley Lake.
That's where we were at. That's
Yep.
where we were out there tubing out
Yes,
there
sir.
where we could see the prison off in the distance. It was kind of neat to be able to see it, but and that's where we were tubing. But so what's that prison is super. I mean, if you were to envision a prison like Shawshank Redemption kind of prison or Alcatraz like, this is the one. I mean, it really looks like a prison.
Yeah,
Should
there's no
look,
other
really.
prison like it. It's spooky. I mean, up to about, I want to say 2014, maybe 13. It had a sign over 6 stand, which was a wall stand entrance where the ambulance come in. Abandon hope for all you that enter. So you could imagine with something that says that, there's no abandon hope for all you that enter. So
yeah, I
they
don't know
took
that's
down.
allowed. Yeah, they took that down because that's not going to be acceptable in the tree hugging world that we live in today. So, but you know what I'm saying. That's an interesting saying. All right, so from there, and you may not know this. Do you know how many people have been executed at that prison? Because that's where death row is.
I don't. I know. I want to say in the 40s or 50s they executed a lot, and father and the son was involved in that execution. Maybe the 40s or 50s.
Well, actually, I did find it. It's since 1911, 164 people have been executed from ages of 16 to 71 years old that have been executed there. So I'm sure there's a ghost or two that's wandering around down there in the death chamber. So were you there when the electric chair was getting used?
I was, but I didn't. They didn't use it. They chose lethal injection. I was there for 2 executions. I would have been there for 3, but I missed it by a year. In '97, Harold McQueen got executed, and he's the one that chose the chair. And I don't know if am I allowed to say the names of the people that got executed?
Yeah,
I don't see any reason why. I think it's pretty much. I mean, it's all over the internet. I'm sure.
Okay. Eddie Harper was the next one, and Chapman, Marcos Chapman, he was the last one that got executed there, and they all chose lethal injection. And I think anybody that went into prison before in the 90s, maybe 96, 94, they can choose the chair. But, they're not executing anybody right now because it's still in the court system, I'm assuming. And to my knowledge, they're trying to use a 1-drug cocktail to do the lethal injection, but I don't know.
Did you have anything to do with the executions?
They may not ever do it again in Kentucky.
Did you have anything to do with it? Were you part of the execution team or anything like that?
And didn't nobody know who they was? Well, I knew a few of them. You wore black mask when you come in. Actually, I was in later part of my career. I was in some training. I trained for the death squad. I trained with them, and we went through training. And I could either play the going the hard way or the easy way, and you'd go through the whole system. You'd get the IV and all that, but I chose the hard way, and it was fun.
Yeah,
but you're not going to win. You're going to get overwhelmed with the team. They know what they're doing. They're very effective, and they run like a machine. So they're good at what they used to.
I noticed you were drinking from a coffee cup there that looked pretty sharp. What was that all about?
Oh yeah. I don't know. Can you read that?
Yeah, that's cool. That's really good. I'll have to look for that in stores.
On the other side.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm gonna tell you a funny story about this cup. I was telling my wife about it. I said, that's before she met you, and everything. I said, yeah. I said, he sees dead people. No, he don't. I said, yeah, honey, he really does. He sees dead people. She said, no, we don't. He does not see dead people. I said, honey, he's a homicide detective.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah,
he's a blonde, so.
Well, one of the stories that I remember you telling me about the death row, or basically the chair, is you're like, hey, listen, if you come down there, I'll take you down there. I'll let you see the chair. I'll even let you sit in it. And I'm like, I'm not sitting in that chair. And he's like, yeah, there's literally grooves up underneath the handles or the arms of the chair where people have wore grooves into this thing. And I'm like, no, I'm not sitting in that thing. There's too much evil going on that thing.
Hey, if
But,
they let me, I'll take you on a tour. If they let us when you come down, but I've got a Polaroid picture a long time ago in the 90s of me sitting in the chair. We had Polaroid pictures, back in.
yeah.
But yeah, if you get in that chair and you put your fingers underneath there, which it really don't bother me. After you work in a prison a long time, it's like I explain it to people like Eddyville, which is Eddyville's the daddy of all the prisons in Kentucky. But I tell them like it's like getting a job in the coal mines. You walk in the coal mines and you're like looking for rocks to fall, and and you don't want to go that extra 10 steps because the Eddyville's like that. You're like when you go in the yard, you like about poop your britches, and then after you get about a year in, 2 years in, 3, 5 years in, you're just out there talking with them like communicating with them. And I've got a really good rapport with a lot of the convicts, not inmates, around the whole state. I go to all the prisons when I used to. They knew who I was. I had a lot of respect from them. They knew the line, but they could come to me if they had a problem that they wouldn't tell anybody else, and I would try to fix it for them, and they respected that. They wasn't telling on nobody because they didn't want to be called the rats. Because usually it was the people that runs the yard telling me, because they trusted me to fix the problem, and I would. That's why they come to me, and you got to have that in prison. If you ain't got somebody that can communicate with them inmates, you're going to be in bad trouble at the end of the.
Well, that brings me to a real quick question. So you live in Kentucky, and there's these individuals that you have, man, you've gotten to know some of these guys. I mean, you were in there for what, 20 plus years.
Yes, sir.
No doubt, same things has happened to you that's happened to Ronnie and myself. We were walking in Walmart, and all of a sudden somebody goes, and it's different for us now because we've been on TV for a decade now. So it's like you don't even know who's going to come up to you. So there's no secrecy now. I mean, they know that we're the cops. But I've had people, and I know Ronnie, I'm pretty sure you have as well, where you've arrested somebody. I mean, the guy that did an appraisal on my roof, he told me that I had ran a search warrant on his house and I arrested him. And I was like, no, I'm not a cop. And he's like, oh yeah, you are. It's okay. It's cool. So no doubt you've had that happen. You've had that happen in your life. And what's that been like for you?
Man, I've got a couple of stories about that. One of the guys, I think Hillberry was the last name. He was a cell warrior, what I would call. He would beat on that cell and beat on that cell, and then when you went in, he listened to you. Well, he got out of prison, and about a month later, me and my wife was at Walmart, and there he was. And he come walking over to me, and I told my wife, I said, well, be prepared. I'm going to have to fight this guy. And, of course, I was carrying, because I carry everywhere I go. But he come up to me, and I said, hey, Hillberry, won't you take him khakis off and go buy you some blue jeans? That's just how I was with him. He said, well, Bill, that's what I'm doing. He said, man, he shook his hand out. He said, it's good to see you. I said, I'm proud of you. I'm proud you got out of there. And that's just the way. You can't change the way you are. You got to, if you show them you're scared, then, which I wasn't scared. I was prepared to do whatever I needed to do. And then there's another time, I'll tell this story real quick. We was in Van Buren, Missouri. We was there on vacation. That's a long ways from here, probably 3.5 hours. Well, that night we went to a little bar to have a few drinks, and I was back there shooting pool, and I had this guy come up. He had a beer there. He said, "Here, there's your beer," and I didn't know who he was. He said, "Are you Troy Belt?" I said, no, that's not me. Cause that's my, when somebody that far away kicks in, I'm not Troy Belt. So I said, no, what's your name? My name's Mark. Man, you look just like Troy Belt. I'm like, that ain't me, buddy. He's like, you even talk like him. I said, well, that's not me. And I'm not from here. And he said he went back, he left, he come back there, and he seen some of my family members back there that work at the prison. Because at the prison, sometimes a lot of family members work together. He come back, he said, Troy, I know that's you. I seen your wife back there, and he said, well, I'm so and so. He said, I bought that beer because you was always fair to me, and I respect that. I said, well, I appreciate that. And then he ended up being an outside inmate, minimum custody. But I still didn't drink the beer. I went back. I said, well, we need to go, it's time to go. I'm not going to, sit there and drink with somebody like that. But, I was fair to him, and it was all good at the end of the day.
How did you, I'm sure there were some people you worked with who weren't fair with the inmates, and how did you deal with that? And how did their career pan out, or how was their just daily life different or more difficult than yours was?
Well, I mean, there's some people there that if they would have seen them, that have probably killed them. But the people I run with, I try to run with people that was fair to the inmates. And, some inmates don't deserve to get treated like that. I don't know if I'm going to asking your question or not, but some inmates don't deserve it, and they don't get that respect. They get to see the other side of me that they like to see. Had an occasion, an inmate said, well, you don't want me to go back the way I used to, I said, well, you don't want me to go back the way I used to.
Yeah.
That was back in the old days. We don't want to go back the old ways. So you don't want it, and I don't want it. So let's not go there, and I always smile at them like I'm smiling now. And that's just me. I'm trying to de-escalate the problem, and sometimes they don't like it. And then, whatever happens, happens.
But and I will agree with you that one of the things I like to say when I was working, especially, was I'm as nice as people let me be. But I guess back to my question that, as you said, you didn't answer. How was it different for people who weren't like you and who were just power tripping and just jerks to the inmates? Did they have extra problems, or were they people you didn't want to deal with? Or
they did. You didn't want them in your cell house, which a lot of the years that I did about 14 of my years in segregation, and I didn't want them in my cell house. I would kick them out. I'd say, you go to the captain's office and tell them to put you somewhere else. You're not coming in here. And, there's a lot of them out there that know that that's the way I was. And I was pretty strict. And
did you give them examples or reasons why you didn't like that, or try to mentor them? Or
I did, but sometimes it just they don't listen. They will not listen. They're going to be a dirt head. I guess that's the best way I could describe it on there, but they're going to be that way. You can't change them. So if I can't change them, I'm getting them away out of my, out of my cell. So and if they see an inmate out the street, they'll run. They'll tuck their tail and run.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that answered the rest of it, didn't it?
Well, my imagination can tell me what's going on, but
yeah.
So when what do they make at that prison? Do they make anything at the KSP?
They had a lot of stuff shut down, but they had auto body. You could get on a list and have anything done to your car for $100. All you had to do is buy the paint.
That's pretty awesome.
Before I retired, I had a tailgate I backed up into something and they fixed it. I think it cost me like $75 for the paint, but they have that, and they have a garment plant which is still running. They make clothes for the entire state, khakis, sheets, pillowcases, stuff like that. They used to have a bag plant. They made trash bags, really good trash bags, and they shut that down, and that's about all it's running now. They got an education back there, but I don't even think they're running it anymore.
Yeah, and for the listeners, if you ever go to a furniture store, you may run across some inmate furniture, which is called Aspen, and it's Arizona State Penitentiary Inmates is what that stands for. And if
We had
like particle wood, would you have?
we had that too. We had furniture. Then they made really good furniture, and it shut down. So
They shut that down because they were
they-
building it. They were at that one prison, but they were also building it at Kentucky State Reformatory
yeah,
because
yeah,
I was like walking through there and I was like, holy cow. I wouldn't mind getting a catalog and ordering from here, but they did say that it takes sometimes 2 to 3 years to get whatever. But there was a lot of the correction officers were like, "Oh yeah, they've made my bedroom set for their kids, the crib and whatever else."
yeah, and they make
And
good
I thought
stuff.
that was pretty.
But
They
they,
do.
they take pride in their work. They do really good. And actually, I've got a set of cornhole boards that I got back in. I used to audit prisons and, go there and audit their sanitation and their files and all that. And the warden that was at that prison, he said, "I'm gonna get you some of them cornhole boards." And I said, "Okay." Well, I didn't think nothing about it. About a year later, I seen him in Lexington, and he's like, "Hey, I got your cornhole boards in the back of my car." So yeah, and I still got them. They've been played on a lot, and they're good. They're very durable and made with the best stuff.
Why did they shut the program down?
I don't know. I don't know if they didn't get enough sales with it. Actually, when I retired, I got the last. They used to give retirees rocking chairs, and I got the last one when I retired. They quit doing it.
Huh.
I don't know. Now they give them flags, I believe, and maybe a challenge coin. But yeah, they quit.
That's wooden, probably. Aren't your challenge coins wooden?
No, they're not. They're good coins they got now. But they got all the people that's been killed on the outside of the coin. I think I give you. Don't you have one?
Yeah. I thought it was a wooden
look
one.
at it. You'll see the names on the outside of on the lip.
So what's it like in there? I mean, I'm sure. Listen, let's just be real here for a quick second. I mean, I'm sure that there's people that get raped in there from time to time, right?
Yeah, I was actually I was on the E Squad team. Back then it was called E Squad. It's a CERT team now, but we was in training and an officer got raped. And you hear
officer did.
An officer, yeah. And when you hear it on the radio, you just change who you are, and you hear it all go on the radio. And actually, the time we got up there, it didn't get done. It got stopped. But the ladies, she did lose some top of her clothes and stuff like that. But when you run up on that stuff, you just want to do something really, really. when you get the inmate, and
Yeah.
actually the guy that done it, he sat on the wall and started smoking it back in. Before they stopped smoking, he sat out on the wall and smoked a cigarette and put his hands behind his back. He knew what time it was.
Yeah.
So.
Huh.
But yeah, I was involved in that. And
was there ever any riots when you were there? Any riots that happened?
We had, there was. We had a probably about 100 inmate riot, maybe in 2010 or 12. I can't something like that. But it was between the blacks and whites, and actually 2 of the officers got wadded up in the middle of them, and no officers got hurt, but. There were some inmates that didn't nobody get killed or anything like that. Everybody took action pretty quick. Everybody was good at what they did. And we usually put good people in wall stands back then, that we knew could shoot, and we knew that wasn't afraid to shoot. So, I don't know what you got now, but that used to be part of if you went in a wall stand, you was that way. Now it might be if you got a warm body, you're put in there. Because it's hard to keep any,
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
But it's true.
Well, because I'm sure that they're shorthanded.
Yeah, very.
As far as, yeah, sorry. When you were in the segregation unit, were they locked down 23 hours a day, or how is it? What was the inmates' daily routine if you're in that segregation part?
Yeah, now back then, we allowed recreation on the walks, so they'd come out. every day for rec every day, but Wednesdays and 2 days they didn't come out, but they'd come out for rec, and it could be 18 inmates out there, and they had fighting, stabbings. Actually, we saved one inmate's life. It got his neck sliced, and he almost died. But yeah, they have fights if they want to. And it fixes a lot of problems. When they stop that, it's no coming out. You go outside, and you're in a cage, and the problematic inmates don't get nothing. They still causing problems. And if they was causing problems on the walk, even for the officer, if they come out and they causing problems, they might end up getting in a little fight and getting some attitude adjustment. That was good. And that's, if I had an opinion about it, I would start that back. I know you're going to have fights and you're going to have stabbings, but it decreases a lot of other problems.
So the inmates were policing themselves. Is that what you said? I think you kind of broke up for a second. Basically, this sucks for us, but don't make it worse. And if you do, we're going to make it bad for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, some of the inmates, they liked some of the officers that treated them with respect. And if one of them inmates disrespected them or threw feces or urine on them or spit on them, when they come out to rec, they're going to get some attitude adjustment. Of course, we get on there as fast as we could and try to save the day, but
as fast as we could.
As fast as we could.
Well, that brings me to a question real quick. Did you ever, there's still a lot of people that are still in prison that you got to know extremely well.
Oh, a lot of them.
Did any of them, I'm sure that there's some of them, it's just human nature. You had to have gotten to the point, and maybe not, but I would think that you had to have liked some of them. And probably wondered,
we built a rapport that I had the respect of a lot of the convicts and, even some of the wardens that worked there and other officers that when my wife started working, back in 2005 or 6, but they knew who she was. And a lot of the inmates that run the yard, they didn't tell me, but when she come across the yard, they would be watching. They would follow her wherever she went. She worked in the photo lab, and she said, "I got these certain inmates that just watch me." I said, "Well, what they're doing is they're making sure nobody bothers you." I said, "They respect me like that, and if anybody bothers you, they would probably go kill them." So, and that's just the respect that I had with some of them. And one of the wardens that worked there, he had the same respect. His name was Phil Parker. I'm not afraid to say his name. He took me under his wing there, and I made who I was because of him.
How easy was it?
He lives in Florida now.
Sorry, I keep talking over you. How easy was it for the inmates to make shanks or anything like that, any type of weapons? How did you guys deal with that?
Very easy. The chain links on the fence, the fencing. We just had to go out there and dig for it, and I had a lot of informants out there on the yard. Big informants that a lot of people wouldn't even think, and I never would give them up to anybody, because I want to keep them from getting hurt. But they would say, "Hey, you got a knife over under the picnic table, or go behind the yard office in that little crack, and you're going to find a knife, or you're going to find some drugs." That's just what you got. That's why you got to have somebody that knows the inmates and respect them. And the big inmates, the convicts, the ones that'll kill you. So you got somebody like that, and you'll find a lot of contraband, and you'll save people's lives.
I would think, and this is just coming to you as a homicide detective in my perspective, and I would think, and by the way, shout out to Wayne, who's sitting behind you, your buddy that lives down the street. Hey, Wayne, good friend of yours. So anyway, the one thing I was going to ask is that, no doubt you've ran across murders that have happened in prison. There's no doubt in my mind. And when I would almost think, granted, you have a pool of however many people are in the cell house, but I bet it's almost probably more difficult to get anybody to come forward on those than it is for us out on the street.
Oh, yeah.
So were there cases that literally are still unsolved that happened literally, and you got like a pool of 30 guys that it's one of these guys that did it. They're still, oh well,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah, and then we've had them that we built rapport with them so good they would tell us, and we would get state police or FBI in there to talk to them, and they decided they was ready, and it's just us talking to them and dealing with them through the years, and when you work in internal affairs, the office I used to work, we had what we called a telephone that they could get a hold of us anytime they wanted to.
Yeah.
Our informants. So they would always tell us how the yard's doing, what's going on. So, we knew.
Yeah. And I knew one of your wardens, Deidre Hart. Shout out to her if she ends up watching this, because I've had drinks with her on more than one occasion over the years. She's fun. When I met her, I couldn't believe she was running that prison. You know what I mean? She's probably like 5'2", and if I don't know, she's really short in stature, but she definitely had a big personality. But anyway, go ahead, Ronnie.
So earlier you mentioned when Jason asked about the riots, you said there was the issue was between the black and white. Was there a big segregation just in general in there, and how, if so, did you guys deal with that, or was there problems that were specific?
Well, what we got, our segregation holds 154 inmates, and we got another segregation that holds 55 inmates, 54, 55. And then we'll take the other ones, it's the top dogs, and we'll ship them out all over the prison. We'll just scatter them out all over the prison, all over the country, state, and some other state. The killings that we've had, them guys was sent out of state. They're out of state contractors. They go from Florida to New Jersey to places like that.
Was there just general tension amongst the inmates of, hey, I'm white, so I have to be over here. I'm black, so I got to go over there. I'm native, I got to go here. Anything like that?
Yeah, you can feel the tension on the yard, and whenever you open that yard back up, if it was going to be okay just by the officers and deputies and supervisors that knew how prison worked. You could feel it. This ain't, hey, something ain't right. Something ain't right. Our guts was always right.
Yeah.
But yeah, they and it depends on who's running that institution as well. I mentioned Parker's name. Parker would close it down for 15, 20, 30 days. He wouldn't allow nothing. And they got to where they was throwing feces out of their windows, thinking that would stop, and that ain't gonna do it with him. And he was hardcore warden, and some other wardens, they would leave it closed for 4 or 5 days, and they'd get a lot of threatening letters, and I don't know exactly what they got because I wasn't a warden there, but they didn't keep it locked down like Phil Parker did.
Yeah.
One of our previous guests on the show, actually, she was a guest on episode number 2, and that's Jackie Muse, and she's actually in here watching this right now. And she said something in her comment. She said that men's prison is so different than women's. And that's something, I know a motherload of correctional officers from the state of Kentucky just because of you, Troy. I don't know. I think I know maybe one in the state of Oklahoma, but in Kentucky, I think I know probably close to 100. And one of the things that's generally what I hear from the correctional officers is they're like, the women's prisons are horrible. It's like drama. There's much more drama going on in a female prison than in the male prisons. And right. I in my brain, I just can't comprehend that. I think that, I'm thinking it wouldn't be that crazy in a female prison. Ronnie and I went to one time to interview a lady down in the female prison, and she looked absolutely miserable up in there. More so than the guys that we've interviewed. Ronnie, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. And we've been to, I feel like we interviewed maybe 2 or 3 women inmates over the years, and dozens and dozens of men. But yeah, the men were always just like, yeah, hey, what's up? And yeah, I mean, sometimes they would talk more than others, but yeah, their just general appearance was better than the women's that we dealt with.
Oh yeah.
And the crazy part, Troy, we interviewed one guy one time that supposedly had information. He was wanting to talk about some Tulsa case, and we went down to this prison, and it was Big Mac. That's kind of like our KSP. That's the, it's the death house and all this other stuff.
I remember that. You telling me about it.
Yeah, and this killer, he had killed his cellmate. And so Ronnie and I kind of researched this guy before we went down there. And man, this guy on paper, he looked like the devil that had just had his horns removed. I mean, this guy, you remember that, Ronnie? This guy was like, yeah. We were scared. I mean, we're not in there shaking, but you know what I mean? We were like, hey, keep your head on a swivel with this guy, man. This guy's dangerous. And so we went down there. Of course, once we meet him, it's like totally, completely opposite. This guy seemed kind of docile, but I remember he didn't want to talk about the Tulsa case. So I asked him, I said, hey, just out of curiosity, I mean, you had like 2 more years to go. Why in the world did you kill your cellmate? And he's like, well, I was just tired of him. I'd had enough of this guy, man.
We had ones like that. Yeah.
And it turned out that actually one of the correction officers that had actually told us, he said, yeah, it's a little deeper than that, where this guy actually kind of owed somebody some money. And it was one of those deals where, hey, you either take care of this or we're going to take care of you kind of deal. So I'm sure that happens from time to time as well. And
one thing that when I was a unit manager, I didn't put that in my Bible, but I was a unit administrator for 6 years. And, you're over the host, and I was over segregation 5 and 6 of them years. But I would have like inmates that come in that killed somebody or assaulted a staff, and I'd have the officers to go get him. And when he got to my door, I'd say, take his handcuffs off. Maybe it wasn't supposed to do that. That was my thing. Only I told the officer, don't you do it. This is me. I'm the boss of this cell house, and this is the way we're going to do it. Take the cuffs off and shut the door. And me and him have come Jesus talk. And I tell him that we're not going to put up with no problems. You can come here and you can live good. If you got problems, then you're going to get problems, And we shook hands, and he was out the door. And a lot of times, 90% of the time, didn't have no problems out of them people because they respect that. They respect you to take them cuffs off. If it was somebody that's always assaulting an officer or something, I wouldn't do that. But if they come in, everybody thought that they was, somebody bad. That's the way I do them. They respected that.
The other thing I want to ask you too is that I'd mentioned this kind of when I was promoing this, is that you guys were also profiled on MSNBC's Lockup. And this was at a time literally where that was probably one of the first shows that ever kind of profiled what's going on up inside of those prisons. And prison is kind of like, to me, I think that prison is like homicide. People out in the communities that watch TV shows, if you're going to watch anything about criminal justice, they're fascinated with prison. And they don't want them they don't want one built in their neighborhood. I can promise you that. They don't even want one in their zip code, but they want them. They want them built. They just don't want it near them. But that's number one, is that I'm curious, what was that like to have cameras up inside of the prison? Because we're talking way years before 60 days in. And what was that like?
Actually, I think it was in 2002. I was still an officer. So if you watch it, you wouldn't even know who I was because I had solid black hair then. And I was a little slimmer. But anyways, some officers said, no, I'm not getting on it. I don't want on it. And so they would try to keep them out. And other officers that did, you had to sign a paper and that you're all right being on the show. And actually, I was on there walking down the walk in 3 cell house in segregation and walking back. And my brother was on there, which he's no longer with us. He passed away in 2010, I believe, 2014. And he played college football. So I got him on. And anytime we had a use of force team, they'd call my brother, Jamie. They'd say, hey, send Jamie to 3 cell house. Because he was 6'5", about 300 and something pounds. And he would drive you through the wall. But the video clip on that lockup is the clip. It starts off with the Lieutenant Gill. He's no longer with us either. He's passed away, but he was lieutenant. And he made this inmate. His name was Victor Hyatt. And Victor Hyatt's in New Jersey or somewhere like that. He's a contract due to him stabbing officers and stuff. And he was dealing with him. So they called my brother over there, and he was on the shield. They had electric shield. And I don't think they got them anymore, but he had electric shield, and he had to stoop his head down to get in the cell. My brother did. And when Victor Height come out of that cell, he was missing 4 teeth and bleeding profusely from the mouth. He told everybody, he said, he said, yeah, they knocked 4 of my teeth out. Yeah, my brother done that when they drove him in the back of the ship. You on the video, when you watch it, you'll hear a lot of, you'll hear a lot of that. But Victor Height, he was fighting. It wasn't because they was just doing it for the heck of it. He was fighting, and he was trying to put something through somebody, or you had to treat it like that. He was a very dangerous man, and not that big. He was probably maybe 5'10", skinny dude, skinhead, white supremacist guy. But he didn't play. He would kill you and sit on top of you and eat the sandwich if he could. So they didn't play with him. There was no games. You don't lower your guard when you go in. Actually, you treat everybody the same. When you go in, it don't matter if they're little or 6'5". It don't matter. And it's different people. I'll tell you another story real quick if we got time.
Yeah, we do. But hey, there was a guy that they profiled on that show. I remember he had a beard. What did he end up doing? Didn't he kill his whole family or something like that? Or
yeah, that was
I
Alex.
can't remember.
That was Alex Bennett. He said he kills child molesters and punks, which he was a punk. He wasn't nothing he said, but he actually cut a inmate's head off and put a toe tag on him to send him back to us. But he liked single cells. We was the only prison in the state with single cells, and he wanted back single cells, so he wouldn't. He was scared, but he wanted to play bad. But he did that, and people were scared of him, but he wasn't nothing to be scared of. I called him like he was. That's why and I watched wherever he was at because I knew he was the type that come behind you and stab you.
So what were they? Did the inmates they ultimately they were pretty cool with the cameras, or were they kind of wanting to be on there? Or?
Some of them was that they wanted to play bad guy like they was bad, but they wasn't. Just like Alex Bennett, he says I killed child molesters and punks, and he was a punk. I ain't got nothing good to say about people like that, but he wasn't. They're not who they are. Some of them, every now and then, you'll like Alec when Victor Hyatt. When he said who he is who he is on the show, on that, Lockup,
Yeah.
We had 2 shows. The Big House was one and Lockup was the other.
The Big House. I don't remember that one. What was that on? Do you remember? You know what that was on?
It was, I'm trying to think of the name. The movie place they give us all their hats, but it's on, you can go on probably YouTube and find it. But they had that one and they had Lockup.
How did you guys deal with protecting the camera crews? And did you guys just have correction officers with them, or?
They made sure that everything was, we double manned the wall stands. We had extra staff that was with them, and they're not going to do nothing to the camera crew. They're not. They might holler something out or something like that, but usually 90% of the time they're not going to do nothing. We would talk to them, and they had respect for, like I say, people like myself and some of the wardens and deputies that we said, hey, this is going to happen, and they're cool about it.
Yeah, I think that probably the number one psychiatric issue, if you were going to have somebody that had a psychiatric issues as far as inmates, I think that the number one issue that were probably the common denominator is you have a lot of people that have anti-personality disorder, and so they're not good people. They're not really good with people. I mean, honestly, and that's why a lot of them end up in there.
If they come over segregation unit, they're going to be screaming and cussing and doing all that just because they're in segregation. But if you once you put an inmate out on the yard and out of segregation, he changes. Just like they've told me bad things before. And I'd go up to them to the thing, and there's probably a lot of people on here watching that knows it. I'd go up to the door thing and I'd say, hey, if you want to talk to me like that, wait till you get out of the hole and talk to me on the yard, and we'll talk about it.
So have you ever thought about writing a book? I mean, because I'm sure you've got as many stories as we do, really, as far as just craziness.
I might one day. There's a book getting ready to come out that Phil Parker, I told you, is writing. It's called Guard. It's going to be coming out, and I think in September. I just talked to him yesterday, by the way, and told him that I don't know if he's on the show, but that book's going to be very good. It's going to have a lot of stories on it, a lot of true stories, and it's called Guard. So those who watching, check it out and get you a copy of it.
Yeah, and as far as the people that we got 4 minutes, a little less than 4 minutes to go here. So just real quick, if somebody was wanting to do this job, I mean, would you recommend this job to others? I mean, I know that it's not notoriously a place that you're ever going to get rich doing it, but is it something that you would do again?
You know,
Really,
it's just
like if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, Troy, I was really thinking about doing that," what would you tell them?
I'd make sure they got their head on straight. Make sure you got your head on straight, know what you're getting into, because they're the best manipulators in the world, and they're going to get you to bring stuff in, and then you're going to spend your time in jail or prison. And you just got to be, like I said, it ain't no love or hate. You got to be in there, and you can't be scared. If you're scared, then that's not the place for you. It's very hard to find good people. I won't say good people. There's a lot of good people out there, but it's hard to find people out there that's like it. Now, the systems just look for a warm body because they're hurting so bad for staff, and, they can't keep staff there. They took the retirement system away, so it's hard they give them more money, but they take it out. And the prison systems has changed so much. So it's just not the same anymore. And, but I would tell them, just get your head on straight and know what you're doing. You never know what's going to happen.
And just from hearing you talk, and I know Jason's talked about this before too, I think the key in most situations, but especially if you're in that confined environment in a prison with those inmates, is you got to be able to communicate with people from all walks of life, black, white.
That's the key.
A murderer to a burglar to a rapist. You got to be able to talk to people, and I think that's just the key.
The best thing when people start, they want to say, "What'd he do? What'd he do? Well, I don't know what he done." And the advice I'd give: don't look through their background, because that might change your. You want to be able just to treat everybody like this person like this, and if you look at their background, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, but in some instances, you probably can't even avoid that because it's such a high-profile situation that you hear about it throughout the state. Yeah. Marani and I met a guy. You remember that? We didn't meet him, but it's a young man that he and his brother just massacred most of their entire family. It was absolutely crazy. And Ronnie and I happened to be at the ops desk inside of the jail, in the heart of the jail. And this kid, I can't remember how old he was, Ronnie. Do you remember? It's like 15 or 16 years old.
He was young.
And this kid walked by us, and literally he had no soul. He was one of those people that you're like, yeah, there's something wrong with him. And you could see it. You could look right through his eyes. It was really bizarre. It was something that stuck with me. But hey, we've hit the wall, man. I mean, we've got like 15 seconds for me to get off of here. I could talk to you. Well, I will talk to you further, and I'm going to have a lot more stories. We'll swap
I've got
stories.
some more, but we're running time.
I know. Well, that and some of the stuff we probably couldn't talk about just because we both don't want to get canceled. So, but nevertheless, always an absolute pleasure, Troy. You are one of a kind, buddy. You are really one of a kind. If I ever needed to,
it's great to meet you. It's great to meet Ronnie Leatherman. Like to bring him down sometime. Also, I'd like to say hello to all the friends and family that is watching. Yeah, glad they joined and hope they enjoyed the show.
Yeah, Christy's
we
in the house
appreciate you
too.
being on here.
Yeah, hello, Christy. Yeah.
And I saw one of your daughters. At least one of your daughters is in here as well. So I've had the honor
of
meeting them as well.
They'll watch it. Yeah, it might be two of them in there, maybe three. But
we got a jet. We got to get off of here. But I'll tell you what. Next week we're going to have a retired FBI profiler, and that ought to be interesting because I'd like to hear how in the heck you even become a profiler and so forth. But hey, listen, Troy, can't thank you enough, buddy.
Thank you, Megan, for putting me on your show.
No, we appreciate it. Really, we
Had a
may
blast.
have you again.
Had a
Well,
blast.
that's what it's all about. Go get a plastic surgeon to have him remove that smile off your face. And yeah, that's a great cup. I love it, ladies and gentlemen. Do what?
It's from the penitentiary.
Listen, for sure. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for being here. We appreciate everybody. We're not a show without you. Take us out, Amanda. We will see you next week.